Hearing that, Seo Juhwan was then surprised. He then asked him to explain why he said that. Hyujin said that he was not trying to convince them all, he was just voicing his opinion. He already considered Sunhwa like his own sister, so he had no intention of leaving her alone with them until they cleared this dungeon. Hearing that, Seo Juhwan pondered for a moment. He then asked if he meant that they would stay together until the end. He began to wonder where all his confidence came from. Could it be that he met a guardian who gave him information and benefits? Senia was surprised when she heard his conjecture. Hearing that, Hyujin then confirmed it. Senia could only be dumbfounded to hear that. The information came from the future, but of course he couldn't tell him about it, so he would just let him think as he pleased. Some guardians were curious about the source of the information. Hyujin was annoyed by it. He thought if they wanted to know about it, at least give him information. Hearing his answer, Seo Juhwan then said that now he understood why he was so confident. He also said that they gave up on bringing Sunhwa to their group, but he still suggested So Yu-hyun to join the two of them. He felt that everything should be fine even if they split up like this. Hearing his suggestion, Hyujin did not object. Hearing that, So Yu-hyun then agreed to join their group. After the determination of the group members was completed, Seo Juhwan then said, "Let's meet again after we finish the branching path." And when he turned his face away from them, he suddenly grinned, and said, "Good luck." After that, Hyujin's group then entered the first path. When they got there, a system notification then appeared asking them to reach the end of the path. The instructions to open the path were at the end. Because less than 5 people entered, a temporary safe zone had been established. Hearing that, Sunhwa then asked if they only needed to go to the end of the path, and while Hyujin was looking, So Yu-hyun suddenly asked him, "It was you, right? The person who appeared on the second floor of D Tower dungeon when his party was fighting against the magic troll." He also remembered they had also met near Cheonggyecheon before. It might be hard for him to remember if they only met once or twice, but he was always with Sunhwa, who was too conspicuous for him. At first he thought he was someone else because he never mentioned it, but he was sure he remembered him correctly, although Hyujin was a little surprised that he recognized him, but he later admitted it anyway. He also asked why he was just saying it now. Hearing that, So Yu-hyun clenched his hands tightly. He then suddenly bowed towards him while saying thank you. So Yu-hyun thanked him for saving him. Hyujin was then dumbfounded to see that. Honestly, So Yu-hyun has regarded him as his hero now. If he didn't fish for magic trolls at that time on the second floor, he would have died. Honestly, he was just trying to save himself because he didn't want to die. But Hyujin felt that he should keep that a secret. So Yu-hyun continued. He was surprised to see him again like this, but he would never forget his help at that time. He then asked him to give him a chance to repay him. Whatever it is, he will do it. So Yu-hyun's state now changed to devotion, respect, appreciation, and gratitude. After saying that, Hyujin also saw that his state showed that he was indeed honest. He didn't expect to get help from the Fist King. Somehow, this didn't feel real to him. Hyujin then said he would remember that, so Yu-hyun then thanked him for that. He then also asked if he could call him Big Brother from now on. Hyujin could only be stunned to hear that, because they were the same age. But So Yu-hyun then said that he didn't care about their age. He had considered him a big bro who saved him. Hyujin could only resign himself to hearing that. He then just asked him to do as he pleased, hearing his polite tone. So Yu-hyun then asked him to speak casually with him. Sunhwa was happy when she saw the interaction between the two of them, and the three of them then continued their journey. They continued down the hallway which seemed endless. After walking for some time, Hyujin then sighed with relief because they finally arrived. Seeing a crystal-like object in front of him, Hyujin knew it was Seoul Station Dungeon's clear crystal, and as he expected, the crystal was still intact. He could only feel helpless about it. He then invited the two of them to sit down and rest, because they will do something quite tiring later. So Yu-hyun then hesitantly asked if they could just rest here. Hearing that, Hyujin explained, this place was designated as a temporary safe zone, so they would be safe if they rested here. They could handle the crystal later. It would be good to save stamina when doing a dungeon raid. Hearing his polite tone, So Yu-hyun then once again asked him to speak casually with him. Hyujin could only resign himself to it. He also wondered if So Yu-hyun was always like this. Sunhwa then suddenly asked, if she was his little sister, then what should she call him? So Yu-hyun was a little surprised to hear that. He then said that she could call him whatever she wanted. Hearing that, Sunhwa then said that she would continue to call Hyujin Appa. Hearing that, honestly when she first started calling him Appa, Hyujin found it hard to get used to it. Sunhwa continued, and she would call him Mr. Yu Hyun, so Yu Hyun didn't seem too happy with the call. But he then could only resign himself to it, ignoring So Yu Hyun's situation. Hyujin then just gave Sunhwa a drink, so Yu Hyun then asked, will the crystal make them very tired, is it that difficult to clear it? Hearing that, Hyujin then explained, the clear crystal is directly related to clearing the dungeon, since this is the last step in the raid dungeon, then there might be some kind of trap. In other words, this is something they should be well prepared for, so Yu Hyun was still confused. By that, Hyujin continued, but there was another problem they had to solve first. Just as Hyujin said that, at the entrance of the hallway where they were, a group of heavily armed people were seen walking in. Hyujin then got a notification from the system that a new player had entered. Hyujin could only be silent seeing that, because there were more than 5 players, the temporary safe zone was removed. Sunhwa and So Yu Hyun were shocked and they got the notification, while holding his sword. Hyujin then told them to get up, now they have to fight them. The group of people who just entered is certainly Seo Juhwan's party. Seeing the 3 of them, Seo Juhwan then smiled cruelly. He also asked, have they not cleared this path yet? Seeing his arrival, Sunhwa and So Yu Hyun were seen preparing their attack. Seo Juhwan continued, as he acted confidently, he thought he would pass it easily. This was enough to make him disappointed. Hearing that, Hyujin then told him not to be disappointed, because he was waiting for him. He had expected him to do something like this. Seo Juhwan just smiled at that. He also mocked him for acting like a smartass, when in fact he was very weak, and he then launched an attack on him. But the attack could still be resisted by Hyujin. Seo Juhwan told him to at least act a little humble, especially if he realized that he would die at his hands. Hearing that, Hyujin just calmly said, can you even kill me, you piece of shit? Hearing that, Seo Juhwan then attacked him repeatedly, but his attacks were still able to be blocked by Hyujin. Even so, Seo Juhwan did not stop his attacks at all, while Hyujin himself only tried to withstand his attacks and did not look like he wanted to attack at all. Seeing that, Seo Juhwan then asked where all his confidence went. If he could only block and dodge. Hyujin seemed to be triggered after hearing his words. He then finally launched an attack towards Seo Juhwan, but his attack was easily blocked by Seo Juhwan and even made him successfully counterattack. Seo Juhwan then insulted him again for that. Is this all he has? Seeing Hyujin's bleeding hand, So Yu Hyun and Sunhwa then felt worried about him. Seeing the 2 of them who were worried about Hyujin, a man from Seo Juhwan's party then asked, do you have time to pay attention to others? So Yu Hyun was surprised when he heard that. And the man suddenly launched an attack at him, but his attack was still dodged by So Yu Hyun. So Yu Hyun and Sunhwa then became alert and mounted an attack horse. The man was annoyed that So Yu Hyun managed to avoid his attack, but he still underestimated So Yu Hyun. He didn't think So Yu Hyun deserved his reputation. They had fought with other people who were used to fighting. Whenever they ganged up on someone like this, the person never lasted 5 minutes. It had been a month since they had done anything like this, so the man wondered if they could prolong this fun. He then said to So Yu Hyun, they would let him go as long as he handed over that girl right now. Maybe he was good with his punches, but they didn't think he could face all of them. So Yu Hyun was then very angry to hear that, while Hyujin himself was now still preoccupied by Seo Juhwan, but he still didn't look like he wanted to attack. Seo Juhwan also realized that it would be boring if he just defended. He then asked if there was nothing else he could do. He felt like Hyujin had the same ability as him in terms of hunting monsters. But wasn't he very stupid in terms of fighting with other players? Hyujin just silence hearing his taunts. Whispering Devil enjoyed the insults he received. Seo Juhwan then mockingly pitied his misfortune, but he was then surprised when he heard Hyujin suddenly say, I have a trait that is very useful against other players. From what he has noticed, it seems that he can't use shadow ambush yet. In his eyes he is not too good. Seo Juhwan was then annoyed to hear that. He then strengthened his grip on his knife until it made his veins appear. He was annoyed by his arrogant attitude, but this way he wouldn't feel guilty for killing him. Hyujin didn't feel scared at all after hearing that. This was the last time he would ask, would he still try to kill them if he didn't hand over Sunhwa? Hearing that, with a cruel smile Seo Juhwan then replied, in the past he would let him go if he handed over Sunhwa, but now no, he would kill him and take her. And Seo Juhwan then rushed back to attack him, but Hyujin did not feel panic or fear at all seeing that. While holding his water bottle, he then casually looked at him, and when Seo Juhwan was approaching, Hyujin then ducked to avoid his attack, then attacked Seo Juhwan using his water bottle right on his chest. His attack succeeded in making Seo Juhwan spit out a mouthful of blood. Seeing that, Hyujin then told him to remember what he was going to say. Everything that would happen was the result of his own actions, and Hyujin then prepared to attack him using his sword. 1 hour earlier, an archer from Seo Juhwan's party then asked if they were really not going to enter. The intermediate administrator blocked the entrance of the dungeon, so weren't they planning to clean it up? Hearing that, Seo Juhwan then said that they couldn't live complacently. With a big smile, he said he would break that bastard's neck and take that girl. Hearing that, the archer then asked if they should ambush them after they finished like he had said. Seo Juhwan confirmed that, but if they took too long, they would go straight in and kill them. He thought the three of them should be exhausted. But they weren't because they hadn't started to finish their task yet. No matter how great he was, that weak bastard won't be able to do anything. A man from Seo Juhwan's party realized that he was talking about Hyujin, but he hesitated. Hyujin seemed quite talented, wasn't it risky? Hearing that, Seo Juhwan then asked him if he hadn't seen him when he was hunting a yaks. He was only a little bit decent. His stats weren't much better than theirs. Instead they should pay more attention to So Yu Hyun. They can handle So Yu Hyun. Let him break that bastard's neck. Different from Seo Juhwan's expectation, now he was completely overwhelmed in the face of Hyujin's attack. He was even almost hit by his attack. He could only curse about it. He became unprepared because Hyujin's fighting style suddenly changed. He also wondered if his stats suddenly increased. The archer also saw that. He then felt worried about him, utilizing when the archer was distracted. So Yu Hyun then quickly rushed towards him. The man was then annoyed because Hyujin continued to ignore him. He then returned to attack him. But his attack was easily blocked by Manhwa using the platinum shield. He could only be surprised to see that. He did not expect Manhwa to really block his attack. Manhwa then worriedly called So Yu Hyun. So Yu Hyun then thanked her for her help, and immediately sent a crushing fist on the man's chest using the power fist skill. The attack succeeded in making the man thrown away until he hit the wall. His partner could only feel worried about him when he saw it. He then could only swear. He then told the archer to help Seo Juhwan quickly then help them. Hearing that, the archer then immediately sent an arrow shot towards Hyujin who was now still fighting against Seo Juhwan. Hyujin also seemed to realize the shot, but he did not feel panic at all, because he could feel the trajectory of each attack. They were shocked when they saw him deflect the arrow. The archer couldn't believe what he saw. He just felt confused how he could block the attack that came from a blind spot. The archer was the long-range DPS of Seo Juhwan's party named Go Janghan. Go Janghan then recovered from his shock and re-prepared his shot. He was one of the most important members in a surprise attack. He then told Seo Juhwan to kill Hyujin. The way he supported others with his long-range attacks, he might be more dangerous than Seo Juhwan, but he needed others to protect him. Go Janghan could only sweat coldly after realizing So Yu Hyun was behind him and was about to attack him. He then could only swear. So Yu Hyun then got annoyed at that. How could he say that after demanding that they hand over a little girl? So Yu Hyun just felt he was a trash, seeing him approaching towards him. Go Janghan then frantically told him not to come closer. He also asked Seo Juhwan to help him, surround that bastard and slaughter him, but only the sound of screaming from Go Janghan could be heard after he said that. Seo Juhwan could only sweat coldly while feeling panicked at this time. He just couldn't believe why the situation ended up like this. Why did their plan fail? They should have won. Did he make a mistake? He wasn't this good before. He seemed to have stats like a level 15 player that you can find anywhere. But, from his observations now, his stats are definitely higher than So Yu Hyun. He then could only swear once again and told himself to calm down. He had to find a way to retaliate. He thought Hyujin might have known his traits but not his skills. Keep underestimating him and see what would happen. Seo Juhwan seemed to gain his confidence once again, but Hyujin didn't seem to care about it. And when Seo Juhwan was about to launch his attack again, he was then surprised because Hyujin suddenly doused him with water. He really didn't know what he meant by his action. Was this a kind of attack or was it about the room temperature? Was it the contents of his thermos? Seo Juhwan then irritably asked if he was playing with him. Hearing that, Hyujin then smiled and replied no, and told him to try to see well. Seo Juhwan was then confused to hear that. But he then realized after looking at the wall behind him, he could only feel shocked when he saw an insect leg sticking out and tearing the wall. The insect then revealed itself completely, which turned out to be a large bee, with one bee that started it. The other bees then tore and penetrated the wall that was there. Seeing the large bee flying towards him, Seo Juhwan could only swear while feeling panicked. Seo Juhwan's party was frightened to see the large bees flying above them. They were also confused about what the creature was, even though it looked like a bee. But they knew that it was a monster. And when Go Jonghan just got up after being knocked down by So Yu Hyun, he was suddenly stung by the bees. Seo Juhwan himself was now busy dispelling the bees that attacked him. Seeing him in trouble, Hyujin pondered for a moment. Bees are sensitive to sweet scents. The honey water he brought was more than enough to provoke their response. Honey bee attack is an event triggered in two branching paths. Contrary to its cute name, these bees are not easy to deal with. Their individual level is not too high, but they usually swarm in thousands. If you don't have a fire mage in your group, then it's better to avoid them. Otherwise, there is only one other strategy you can use. After pondering that, Hyujin then told the two of them to get down. Hearing that, they then immediately got down as he told them. After they got down, the bees now completely ignored them and just flew past them. You can take advantage of the fact that they don't realize anything below a certain height as a target. The suffering from a bee's venom is unimaginable. Seo Juhwan looked very painful after being repeatedly stung by the bees. He then could only shout for help, but Hyujin just ignored his pleas for help, and watched him die surrounded by bees. After a while, the crowd of bees finally left there. Hyujin then got up from his down position after seeing that. After cleaning the dust attached to his clothes, he then glanced at Seo Juhwan's corpse who died horribly. Seeing that, Hyujin just thought, those who are determined to kill others must be determined to face their own death. He couldn't blame him, because he was the one who caused all this. Shortly after that, the system notification then appeared. The system has judged this situation as a PK, player killer. This is the first PK since the end of the tutorial, forcibly awakening the innate ability that was not active because of the first PK. The innate ability is called eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It is appropriate to return the favor in kind, especially if it is revenge. This innate ability will be triggered when he is hit by a preemptive attack from a player. If he remains passive after receiving a preemptive attack, then all buffs will apply as debuffs. He gets additional attack power, attack speed, critical chance, and a 7% reduction in mana point usage if he stays passive after receiving a preemptive attack. Then all buffs will become debuffs for him. He gets a small chance to suffer an attack if he stays passive after receiving a preemptive attack. Hyujin was quite surprised because he got a new innate ability. He didn't understand how he could get it, when he already had Eye of Perception as his innate ability, and getting it this fast was strange. Somehow, he got another one. He had also heard about this ability before. This ability has one disadvantage, which is that it requires a counterattack, but it buffs the player when get attacked first. It was a relatively common ability in the old Hyujin timeline. It was brilliant when used in battles between players. In fact, it was so famous that it would be strange for an aspiring civil servant like him to not even know about it. He was confused, whether such an ability had been neglected. He then wondered the reason why this could happen. Seeing his abnormal behavior, So Yu Hyun then called him. He thought that Hyujin felt guilty for killing them all, so he then comforted him by saying that it was not his fault. So he asked him not to blame himself. If he was in his position, he would do the same thing, because they deserved to die. Manhwa also agreed with his words. It was indeed very scary, but they were bad people, so he did not need to feel guilty. Hyujin could only be dumbfounded hearing that. They thought he was blaming himself for doing PK and tried to comfort him. Hyujin then said that he was okay. To be honest, he did feel bad about it. But if they let go of the person who wanted to kill them, then they would end up getting killed. That's why he didn't regret his decision. He would rather be a murderer than let them all die. Lady of the Scales understood his true feelings after hearing him say that. She was seriously thinking of giving him a big gift, the state they both came to trust, rely on, and respect towards him. After hearing him say that, seeing that, Hyujin could only lament their deep emotions. Even without them worrying about him, he was not too bothered, but he then soon realized something. Come to think of it, he was the one who was the least bothered. Maybe he had changed a lot. After getting ready, they then continued the process of clearing the dungeon, and Hyujin then walked closer to the clear crystal. Looking at the crystal in front of him, Hyujin couldn't help but think, the dungeon clear was in front of them, they only needed to destroy one crystal on another branching path. But the crystal suddenly changed color and a black spot then appeared on the surface of the crystal, and a system notification sound then sounded. The Soul Station crystal did not like intruders. And the crystal then emitted dangerous gas around. The eye of perception detected the danger. They also noticed the sudden change. Manhwa felt anxious seeing it. Hyujin then told the two of them to retreat. Hearing that, Manhwa then asked what about him. Hyujin said that he had to deal with it. He then calmed them down and told them not to worry. Right after saying that, Hyujin then took the honeybee stinger that he had collected in the inventory. He had prepared an antidote for the poisonous gas on the crystal. He was now also wearing mandra gloves that had poison resistance. The reason why he chose these gloves as his reward was because the poison resistance, although weak, but he knew that the additional poison resistance of 3 was not enough to eliminate it completely. The effect of the poison resistance then worked after he was exposed to the gas released by the crystal. He could not linger for long, so he had to quickly destroy the crystal before the poison spread. And as Hyujin was preparing to launch an attack, he then realized that the smoke was getting thicker. He couldn't even see in front of him. He couldn't see the crystal now. The crystal poison began to seep into his body. The poison resistance effect then began to work. Hyujin then began to sweat profusely because he had reached the limit to hold his breath. The eye of perception then suddenly detected a great danger. Hyujin was then shocked and the gas became so thick that it made him completely unable to see the crystal, and just when his vision was almost completely closed, Hyujin then grasped the bee sting in his hand tightly. After rushing over, he then immediately tried to reach the crystal. They were surprised when the smoke became thicker and affected them. While So Yu-hyun himself was shocked and confused how Hyujin could be so close to the crystal. Hyujin struggled very hard to reach the crystal, until finally he managed to touch the crystal using his hand. Right after that, a system notification then appeared. The poison from Soul Station was being neutralized, with the disappearance of the crystal from its place. The gas that had filled the entire room had now disappeared, and Hyujin was seen panting with purplish patches that filled his skin. They also realized his bad condition. Hyujin just didn't expect it to be more difficult than he thought, but fortunately he succeeded. By getting the Soul Station crystal, he had now fulfilled half of the dungeon clearing requirements. Seeing that, Nameless Observer observed him with interest, while Whispering Evil was disappointed. Seeing that, Hyujin realized that it seemed like that demon bastard wanted him dead. While Hyujin was sipping a potion, So Yu-hyun then asked how he did it. He couldn't see it because it was covered in gas. Hearing that, Hyujin then replied, did he remember the honeybee stinger they got before? He neutralized the poison with it, but So Yu-hyun was still confused about how he knew he could neutralize the gas that way. Hearing that, Hyujin only replied that the item description mentioned something about neutralizing poison. Hearing that, So Yu-hyun then asked, did he find all that after reading the description? Hyujin confirmed that, actually it was Great Explorer Jackson who discovered the strategy, not him. Hearing his confirmation, they then looked at him with admiring glances. Ignoring their admiring glances, Hyujin then invited them to leave. They had completed one path, so the other path would be easier. After a while, they then arrived at the second path. Xenia just stared in silence when she saw Hyujin rushing towards the crystal. He didn't use the honey bees from the attack just to get rid of Seo Ju-hwan, but he also did it to collect their drop items. Because he already knew that they had a poison neutralizing effect, his strategy was so clear that she didn't need to explain it to the stream viewers. Many anonymous guardians had now joined her channel. Hyujin again used the same strategy to complete the path. He held his breath and immediately rushed towards the crystal, and when he was close he then immediately grabbed it. With the acquisition of the crystal, he has now fulfilled the requirements of completing the Soul Station crystal. With the completion of the Soul Station crystal, the dungeon break of the Soul Station dungeon has been sealed. Right after that, Xenia then appeared in front of him, and said that now she would give his reward. Seeing that, Hyujin realized that there must be something special if she had to do it herself. Xenia confirmed that bonus stat points would be distributed to party members who completed the Soul Station dungeon, and player Kim Hyujin would be given a selection of items for his amazing game. Hyujin was not surprised after hearing that. Because he already knew that the first completion of the Soul Station dungeon would give him several choices of rewards, nameless observers curious about what he would choose. Looking at the list of rewards in front of him, Hyujin pondered for a moment. Gold will give him wealth, but that doesn't mean you can directly convert it into cash. But if the gold is 3.75 kilograms, the amount has a double meaning because it foreshadows a future story dungeon. He also feels that gold weighing maybe around 200 million won. There were many reasons for ordinary people to choose gold without hesitation. He also felt tempted because the value of the gold was much more than he had ever dreamed of, but the rights of players' rights were not yet protected by the relevant laws at the early stage, so they still had to hand over part of their income as taxes. He remembered, especially gold, being confiscated on the grounds that it was goods from the other world that were considered dangerous. It was indeed very unfair, but that was what he would face for now. He would be lucky if the government didn't take everything when trying to cash it in. Then, he wouldn't have chosen it, and instead chose the Type B recovery elixir. The Guardians were curious and astonished by his choice, but Hyujin just ignored it. With Hyujin having chosen his reward, the dungeon break of the Soul Station dungeon was closed. In the hot afternoon, there was a bus that stopped at a bus station. There were Hyujin and his older sister, Kim Ah-hyung, who were about to get on the bus. After sitting down, Ah-hyung then asked why he had to move. Had he become rich or what? Hearing that, Hyujin replied yes, he had a little savings, about 100 million won, but Ah-hyung didn't believe what he said and instead thought he was drunk. Hyujin could only be silent hearing that. He couldn't blame her for not believing him. 100 million won wasn't just a lot of money, it was more than the amount of money their family had ever had. The Type B recovery elixir he chose was very effective against certain diseases. As planned, he gave the elixir to a certain person, just like Seo Ju-hwan did in the first timeline. At that time he remembered that the person had enough finances to pay a high price, and suffered from a disease that was compatible with the elixir. He was Seo Ju-hwan's buyer. In return, he received about 1 billion won, or about $1 million. He guessed that, if everything went the same as it did in the first timeline, the trade would be successful. Not only that, but it also made him connect with very influential people. While Hyujin was recalling the moment he sold the potion, Ah-hyung was surprised when she read the news content from her phone. Seeing that, Hyujin then asked what she saw. Ah-hyung replied that she only saw the news of Sungshin CEO appearing. She was surprised when she saw him looking with his hair intact. As far as she knew, Song Kyung CEO was an old man who lost all his hair. She then asked if he was wearing a wig. She only lamented that the current artwork was so good that it looked exactly like the original one. Even the comments on the article only talked about his hair. Hearing that, Hyujin then silently denied her guess. It wasn't a wig, but real hair. He knew that because he saw it himself when his hair grew after he drank the elixir he sold. The recovery elixir Type B was also called the extremely effective hair growth solution. It was called recovery elixir, but it was just an item that treated baldness. However, the man who built a company with such prestige with his own hands and nurtured it until it became as big as it is now, had seen his potential and invested in him. At that time Hyujin proposed $100,000 in cash and an apartment, and he agreed. Also, he agreed to help him handle the procedures regarding the adoption of Sunhwa, who had an uncertain future after the tutorial. Her mother had praised Sunhwa as a smart and cheerful girl. She said she wanted Sunhwa to live with them, so Hyujin just hoped that Sunhwa didn't mind that. Hyujin then once again invited her to move. He did buy a house. It was time for their family to live in a better place and work less. Hearing that, Ah-hyung just answered carelessly because she still didn't believe it. Near where they were there was a gate that suddenly appeared. Hyujin seemed not to realize the existence of the gate. Hyujin then said that their whole family had to go home early today. Around the gate there were many people walking who seemed not to realize the existence of the gate, and in the middle of the crowd there was a woman who seemed to be able to see the gate. And when Hyujin took his sister to go home and eat with their mother, he was then surprised when he finally saw the gate. He knew it was a flash gate. He was only surprised because it appeared shortly after the Soul Station dungeon opened, and as he observed the gate, he then also saw the woman who walked closer to the gate. He was surprised when he saw her, because he recognized the woman who was Shin Yanseo. After the bus stopped, he then said to Ah-hyung that he would leave first, because there was something important now. Ah-hyung was then surprised to hear that, because it would be a bit far to walk if he stopped here. Hyujin certainly didn't care about that. He then thought, There was only one gate that appeared in the Hongjidong area around this time. It would later be known as the first dungeon completed by the Sword Empress. But there was little information about it. It didn't become history because of its nature as a flash gate or special dungeon. This place became famous because it was the first dungeon where the strongest PvP player, the Sword Empress, Shin Yanseo, appeared. After approaching her, he then asked if she would enter. Hearing that, Shin Yanseo then asked if he could see it. She was also confused about who he was. Hyujin confirmed that he was a player, so he could also see the gates. After observing her for a while, he didn't see a hint of the Sword Empress he remembered from 2028 in her. Her lively and cute atmosphere was very different from the Two-Faced Slayer nickname she got. He then looked her status window. He was a little speechless when he saw the conclusion. He even wondered if the conclusion should always be strange or something. Hearing that, Shin Yanseo was surprised when he turned out to be a player. She then asked if he knew much about this. Hyujin then explained, "This is called a gate. Monsters will come out if they don't clear it in time." Shin Yanseo was a little surprised to hear that. She had heard the intermediate administrator say that, but she had never seen it. Hearing that, Hyujin then replied, it hadn't happened yet because every dungeon that appeared had been cleared, but even the players who had cleared the dungeon accepted the existence of the dungeon break, so it might be true. Hearing that, Shin Yanseo then remembered something. A man with the title of Tutorial Ender. There had been no dungeon break in this timeline. It was because Hyujin had used his knowledge to clear it quickly once it appeared. In the original timeline, Seoul Station Dungeon had experienced dungeon breaks several times. A lot of players died before the right strategy was found to clean it up. This time, he had intervened to prevent all of that, but he knew there would be so many dungeons and gates popping up that he wouldn't be able to handle them all alone, and the dungeon break will finally happen. Ending his inner thoughts, Hyujin then asked if she was planning to enter. Hearing that, Shin Yanseo then hesitantly asked if it would be okay. Someone like Ender's tutorial might be okay, but she doubted she would be okay. Hearing that, Hyujin then said that it would be fine. Even the tutorial Ender would eventually be defeated by her in PvP. Hyujin then offered to Shin Yanseo to form a party with him. She was then surprised by that. She then politely asked if she could know what his level was. Hyujin replied that he was level 19. Shin Yanseo was a little surprised to hear that. She was surprised because there was another person whose level had reached this far. She was also level 19. She thought she was the fastest to level up. She then asked Hyujin to wait for a while. Shortly after, she then sent a party request to him. After it was sent, Hyujin then immediately accepted the invitation. Shin Yanseo suddenly asked how old he was. Hyujin was then surprised and confused to hear that, but he then answered, he was 20 years old. Shin Yanseo was surprised to hear that. For some reason, she thought he was older. Hearing that, Hyujin couldn't help but think, mentally he might be 30 years old but physically he was only 20 years old. Shin Yanseo then invited him to talk casually because they were also the same age. Hyujin actually didn't have a problem with it, but he said, let's save that for if we get out of this alive. Shin Yanseo agreed with that, and they then entered the Flash Gate. He actually didn't expect to experience this on the way home from visiting CEO Sungshin, but he knew this was his opportunity to see the contents of the gate that the Sword Empress entered immediately after the tutorial ended, while Ah Hyung herself was shocked when she saw him suddenly disappear in front of her. She then asked where did he go. System notification then appeared shortly after that. He had entered the Flash Gate, the underground tunnel. Hearing that, Hyujin then asked shall he take a look. The return gate was still active. It doesn't seem to be set to prevent players from running away. If the Sword Empress can clear it so quickly after the tutorial, he feels that this gate should not be too difficult. A few moments later, the system notification then reappeared announcing that monsters had appeared. Right after the announcement, several red-eyed rabbits appeared in front of them. They were rabbit monsters with level 18. Seeing that, Shin Yanseo then immediately took out her weapon. She was quite surprised at their large size. She also wondered if they were boss monsters, but she felt they didn't look very strong. Hyujin silently confirmed that they were indeed not strong monsters. Unlike players, you can usually tell how strong monsters are from their appearance, because they are rabbit-shaped. Then they will not be too threatening or as strong as other monsters. Their biggest characteristic is that once they judge the target as a threat, they will flee at high speed, and sure enough, when they saw the two of them getting ready to attack, the rabbits then just ran away. Shin Yanseo was then dumbfounded to see that. Hyujin then explained, they ran away because they sensed danger from them. If possible, they should finish off the rabbits with one attack. Hyujin asked could she do it. Hearing his question, Shin Yanseo then smiled and replied of course she could. She already had the perfect skill to do it. Hearing that, Hyujin then remembered that she had the single-hit finisher. It was very early. But she would always be the Sword Empress, and as the rabbits frantically tried to escape, Shin Yanseo then quickly moved towards one of the rabbits, and when she got close, she then immediately slashed at the rabbit. That one slash managed to kill the rabbit. Seeing that, Hyujin knew it was the innate ability of the Sword Empress, the single-hit finisher, quite amazing by itself. But he did not expect that she would be so proficient with that ability so soon. In addition, he also saw her completely change demeanor when she started fighting. She looked like an ordinary college student a moment ago, but now, she completely resembles a woman who is obsessed with fighting like the image of her that he remembers. When Shin Yanseo was slaughtering the rabbits, Hyujin of course was not idle. He then joined her to slaughter the rabbits shortly after that. In addition, he did not expect that this gate would be filled with rabbit monsters. They are almost invincible against opponents with insufficient attack speed, but they have weak attack power and defense. They are very famous among players for slightly different reasons. If he is lucky, he might be able to get that item here. He was a little disappointed that there was no item drop after all the slaughter. While Shin Yanseo herself was now silently glancing at him for a moment, she then suddenly asked if he had ever been here before. Hearing that, Hyujin replied no, it was his first time. Shin Yanseo thought that way because she saw that he could kill them easily even though they were so fast. He also only needed one attack to take them down. She actually wanted to politely ask, but she was a little annoyed with the formality. Now that she knew they were the same age, trying to talk politely made her crazy, so she then invited him to talk casually, and she then asked what his name was. Hyujin replied, Kim Hyujin. Hearing that, Shin Yanseo said that she would call him Hyujin, and she then introduced herself. There was something she wanted to ask him before they went in. She wanted to know if he knew much about the gates, but she became convinced after seeing him kill the rabbit monsters. She then asked how he knew so much. Hyujin seemed a little unprepared for her sudden question. He then recalled the time when he studied desperately to be able to pass the civil servant exam. He got all that knowledge of course because he learned it to become a civil servant. So he then just said that she would know everything if she studied, but Shin Yanseo certainly didn't believe it. Did he think she would believe it? Whispering Devil was amused by his response. But their attention was then immediately distracted when they saw a lot of rabbit monsters appear. Seeing that, Hyujin then invited her to finish them first before they talked. Shin Yanseo also agreed with that. Either way they will finish it in a flash. Among the items dropped by the rabbit monster is something that can be very helpful for players who are at level 30 to 40. He doesn't expect the item to be dropped after killing 1 or 2 rabbits, but since he is already here, then he will make sure to get it before leaving. He will hunt down the rabbits until the item appears. While Xenia was observing the two of them in silence, suddenly there was a voice talking to her. The voice praised Hyujin as an extraordinary player. The voice came from a fairy-like figure named Roa. Roa then asked if she was streaming him. Xenia said yes. After seeing his action, Roa then asked if he was really level 19. There shouldn't be many players who could keep up with Yanseo, so she then decided to see his status. But she was then surprised because she couldn't see Hyujin's status because of denied access. Seeing that, Xenia then explained. Hyujin changed his own personal info access rights, and he also deleted his name from the player leaderboard. Roa was then shocked to hear that. She was confused about how he knew about the access rights. Intermediate administrators like them usually don't tell players about it. She then asked her if she had told him. Xenia denied that. She didn't do anything against the commandments, so she told her not to worry. Roa felt this was strange. She could see a player taking advantage of the system. But he did something insolent, hiding his status from the beginning. She felt that Hyujin was a bit of a thinker. He was definitely the kind of guy who would take advantage of an easy target. Xenia just fell silent hearing that. Roa then thought that streaming Hyujin must make a lot of profit, so she then asked if she could stream him whenever she was not around. But Xenia immediately refused her request, because she had made an exclusive contract with him. Roa was shocked to hear that. Because she could only do that 3 times, she didn't understand why she made a contract with the player so easily. What would she do if he was only a player who progressed rapidly in the early stages? Hearing that, Xenia only replied that it was none of her business. Hyujin certainly didn't know the conversation between the two intermediate administrators because he was now busy killing the rabbits, and when he had killed God knows how many rabbit monsters, he then finally got an item drop. The item was a quality iron sword with a normal grade with an attack power of 7 to 18 and a durability of 300. After swinging it for a moment, he then threw it towards Yanseo. Yanseo was then surprised to see it, but she was then able to quickly catch it. Hyujin told her to use it if it was better than her current weapon. Yanseo was surprised to hear that, then asked if this was okay with him. Hearing that, Hyujin just said it seemed like she was better with the sword than him. Yanseo then thanked him. Then he would gladly accept it. In return, she would give him the next item drop. Whatever it was, Hyujin gladly accepted it. He wasn't aiming for a weapon in the first place, he had a rough knowledge of the monsters that would appear in the next 10 years. So the weapon he had now was good enough. The quality iron sword was not what he needed. After killing who knows how many rabbit monsters, he then wondered how many more rabbits they had to kill before that item appeared. It had to be dropped before the gate reached the respawn limit. Shortly after that, he then saw the item drop that appeared from the rabbit he killed. He then immediately picked it up. He was happy because this item was what he was looking for. This item is probably the biggest harvest you can get from this gate. The item is a Legolas ring that has an effect of 2% attack damage HP absorption, and when Hyujin was reading the description of the item he just got, he was surprised when he saw the clear crystal that had appeared.